brilliant young nobleman came to my attention. Even though disfigured by a laboratory accident, he was my choice to go into the world, to raise a mighty army, and to destroy the so-called human civilization which had driven us into exile. You were my hope, Cobra Commander.
A creepy science guy, a gun that hair dries. Commander! Commander! Acting out of spite, robots help him fight. Commander! Commander! A new comics run, new stories inside, a new universe that we have tried. Who will look inside?
Ladies and gentlemen, Talking Joe is on the air. And nobody beats Talking Joe, an international podcast.
Hey, it's me, Mark. You are listening to Talking Joe, the G.I. Joe comics podcast, and we are once again coming to you live and direct from the Energon universe as a pre-record. If you are new to the show, you can find out all about us over at the website, which is talkingjoe.co.uk. Today, we will be looking at Cobra Commander issue 4 and 5, which was released 17th of April and 22nd of May 2024. But I will not be talking to myself about these issues. As always, I will be joined by the most dangerous man in the world. It's a real American Tim. It's Tim Finn.
Hello, Mark, and hello, listeners.
How you doing, Tim?
I am well.
Excellent stuff. Tim, before we jump into this issue, I had a couple of little nuggets that I noticed from the last issues that we didn't actually call out in the episode. So I'll just note those for our, as the podcaster record. So the two things I noticed were, one, the Dreadnought Torch, as he appeared, was not in his classified design. So I think this was before the Torch render happened, and I just guess that the artist was not supplied with the reference ahead of it being made public. So they just went with the the OG Torch design, which was without the some of the classified chicanery that was added on, like the Torch flaming tattoos that go up his arms on the classified design. And there was a bonus metaphor in the last issue as well, which was when Nemesis was sort of trudging through the swampy jungle, that a snake went for him and he sort of grabbed it and tore it apart. So Nemesis and snakes not necessarily getting on very well. Metaphor, foreboding. What do you think, Tim?
Yeah, I think I did notice that at the time and thought, symbolism. But then I thought, well, Nemesis Enforcer is part of Cobra Law, and it is an organic thing. It's not like it was like a metal snake or a cyborg snake. And then I thought, well, maybe there aren't snakes in the Himalayas because it's so cold.
True.
So I think it is somewhat symbolic. I think it's lightly symbolic, but I don't think it's the key to the miniseries, or like the symbolic high points.
Okay, so these two issues were brought to us by the creative team of writer Joshua Wiliamson, artist Andrea Milana, colorist Analisa Leoni, letterer Rus Wooton, editors Sean Mackiewicz and Jonathan Manning, with Andre Juarez on logo and publication design and Julian Crabb on production. Covers, we've got, I think, 10 total, so let's have a whistle-stop tour. Tim?
Let's have a look at the covers in the gallery.
Yeah, if you Google Cobra Commander number 4 cover, the internet may show you the redacted non-spoiler version, where Cobra Commander is in a swamp with his back against a tree and his pistol at the ready, and a silhouette is coming up from the distance. And of course, at the end of issue 3, it was revealed that was Nemesis Enforcer. It is a nicely drawn and colored cover by the regular creative team of this book. It's quite dark, actually, and yet the colors still read as colors. You know, the blue is still a blue, the green is still a green, the maroon is still a maroon. Cover B is by Bresson and Lucas. So the artist who will be drawing the Destro miniseries draws this cover. We're looking up at Cobra Commander. We are amongst some glowing pink, violet Energon crystals. Cobra Commander is holding them in his two hands, and they're sort of spilling out from his fingers the way that you imagine a James Bond villain, and a bunch of diamonds, and then swooping in from above behind him is Nemesis Enforcer with a sort of beige tan background. Cover C is the 1:10 ratio variants. This is drawn by Chris Burnham, and it is colored by Brian Rebner. This is 4 of 5 of these connecting covers where the 5 together create a kind of montage, sort of telling the story visually of the whole miniseries, although they do act on their own as individual covers. In this case, we are in Cobra Law with a big Cobra Law sort of tree stalk in the background as a wide, straight vertical, and then in front of it, somewhat small, are Cobra Commander and Nemesis Enforcer fighting in midair with Nemesis Enforcer's wings spread. And then the bottom part of the cover is sort of the root structure of the Cobra Law tree, but it starts to look sort of underwater and aquatic with sort of bulbous shapes that look kind of like air bubbles, and a bunch of streaking diagonal lights, which I think originated in the previous cover in issue 3. Yep. The cover D, 1/25, is drawn art and color by Torrin Clark. This is Nemesis Enforcer in front of the explosion, the 1982 G.I. Joe toy packaging explosion. Nemesis Enforcer, his arms are spread out, his palms are up, his wings are somewhat spread. One knee is up, sort of a dramatic, sort of angelic pose, like an angel. And then cover D is drawn by Ben Oliver, and this is Cobra Commander calf deep in swamp water with some light but murky, fuzzy out of focus swamp trees behind him, and then in the extreme foreground, behind the corner box and some of the logo, is a purple blue gloved hand belonging to Nemesis Enforcer, because also coming in on the top right as a sort of a boundary element is some of Nemesis Enforcer's tattered wing. And so Cobra Commander is sort of walking forward, but also tense and at the ready, and he's holding in his left hand a pistol, and in his right hand a glowing red dagger. So this cover hints at some tech that's not standard, that's somehow fantastic. Do you want to talk about I guess there are no retailer variants, right?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay. Cobra Commander number 5, cover A by our creative team for the regular issues, interiors by Milana and Leoni. This is, we are behind Cobra Commander up on a dais. He's got his cape and his Cobra staff. His hands are folded behind his back, and he is looking straight out over a wide red walkway, and on either side of it are hundreds and thousands of Cobra soldiers, all armored up with their chest plating and their machine guns. And there's a great sense of depth here, because the sort of third of them that are furthest back are somewhat in shadow, as if something above them, like the ceiling or banners hanging, are making them a little darker. And then the sort of middle third of them are in shadow, but not as much. And then the third of them that are closest to us are not at all in shadow. And so the little bit of sort of floor that they're standing on close is sort of off-white, and then further is sort of off-white blue, and then in the distance is more of a blue. And this cover is boldly symmetrical. Basically everything happening on the left side is sort of a mirror image of everything on the right. And that red, very wide sort of carpet makes for a really bold compositional element. This cover is sort of very, very triangular. Cover B is drawn and covered by Mateus Santaluoco, who has done a couple covers previously, but also is best known for really great issues and covers of Ninja Turtles. This is a close-up of Cobra Commander's faceplate. His head is tilted slightly, and his head is turning a little bit off axis. Reflected in the cover is Destro's head and shoulders, and there's a green cast to both the reflection in the silver mask as well as sort of behind this little bit of non-background behind Cobra Commander. Destro his eyes are turned, so Destro is at an angle, but he's looking straight into Cobra Commander, who's looking straight into Destro's eyes. Cover C is, again, a 1 in 10 by Chris Burnham and Brian Reber. This is the 5th of 5 connecting covers, and this is now sort of the end of the story as depicted in 5 images. Cobra Commander is standing, legs spread apart, arms akimbo, brown-purple sky with some diagonal vanishing lines up in the top 2/3. Behind him, he's standing on, a concrete, flat ground. Behind him are a dozen Cobra soldiers and a Hiss tank, and this is definitely the classified Hiss tank, right, Mark?
That's right. Yep, it's the HasLab classified Hiss tank.
Cobra Commander here is backlit, so all of his left edges are his standard blue with a little bit of a highlight, and then sort of all of the rest of him is a core shadow, and then he's casting a bit of a shadow on the ground. And Brian Reber is not my favorite color artist. I think I'd like sort of a higher key, greater contrast from the highlights of the light source to the midtones and the shadows here. And I feel like Cobra Commander he could pop a little bit more from the murky purple of the background sky.
You could imagine a different color palette sort of emphasizing a sort of a communist propaganda type look to this one, maybe.
Yes, although the previous 4 covers in this 5-part connecting series have not been doing like Russian constructivism. But yes, the diagonals and the posing and some of the background elements of sort of copied and pasted soldiers and the diagonal of them holding their machine guns does somewhat recall that. But there's so much negative space here that's not taken up by like a bold face or fist or piece of type that I don't think it is a direct illusion. And then there's sort of a nondescript but interesting background building behind all of them. Cover D is the 1 in 25 ratio variant, and it is drawn and colored by Brian Level, who this is a name I've seen. He's not an artist I've really tracked. Mark, does this artist jump out at you from certain things?
Brian Level is both a comic artist and a tattoo artist. Comic credits include Lazarus, Batman versus Bigby, A Wolf in Gotham.
Okay. And this is Mercer, and we're at about knee or waist height. We are slightly looking up at Mercer, which makes sense because he's very tall. His fists are both clenched, his feet are spread, his head is slightly tilted. He's looking just over you and past you. His mouth is set firmly and grim, but no teeth are baring, and he is threatening. And then lastly, the 1 in 50.
The 1 in 50.
1 in 50 is drawn and colored by Dustin Nguyen. This is Cobra Commander, head and shoulders in the background, pointing with his right hand at us, somewhat looming over a scene of a dozen or 2 Cobra soldiers. And I don't know from all the classified figures, are these very specifically like Cobra soldiers and officers, or these certain kinds of Cobra soldiers?
I'm not 100% sure. It's a mix of male and female, and I think it's, vaguely alluding to the Cobra Infantry and possibly the Valkyries, the 2 female Cobra Infantry classified toys.
The 2-pack, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And he's pointing at us. It's a bit like the your country needs you kind of thing.
Yeah.
Cobra needs you.
And there is, as with the A cover by Andrea and Milana, there's copy and paste here. So all like 1,000 soldiers in that A cover are the exact same drawing, but shrunken slightly every time they go back one row further from us to create a sense of depth. Here there are, about 20 characters, maybe 2 or 3 different ones, and there are just 3 or 4 rows of them. And there's some mist both in front of them, between them, and behind them. And then behind Cobra Commander, there is some nondescript tech that's been knocked back with a white dot screen. So it's like Wynn inked some like shiny metallic stuff, but then put white dots over it as a halftone to make it sort of half disappear. This cover is striking because it's all sort of 2 colors. It's all like whitish and bluish, and then just a couple of red accents. And whereas I was hard on the last Dustin Wynn cover for the Energon universe, I like this one a lot. And this, could have been the A cover, because in some ways it's sort of the opposite angle of the A cover.
It's slightly let down by me by the sort of copy and paste aspect of these troopers, which, while their faces and their bodies have sort of slightly differentiated, all of those arms up in the air are mostly the same, albeit some are bigger and some are smaller. And there's a couple of them, they just look like they're not quite in the right proportions, that given the perspective and the layers that we've got, that some of them just look a bit too big.
Yes, I think I agree with you. Whenever I see a copy and paste job in comics, I think of something that I'm gonna paraphrase this wrong, but Larry Hama has said that Wally Wood used to say to him, Larry Hama, and it goes something like, "Don't invent what you can swipe. Don't swipe what you can copy. Don't copy what you can't trace." It was sort of a 3-tier, like, this is hard. It takes time. It doesn't pay well. Use shortcuts. And, so like trace a photo instead of drawing a car, trace the photo of a car, that kind of thing. And I think some of it was slightly said in jest, although I have never met Wally Wood, of course, who passed away many years ago. But I do think about this whenever I see an artist, particularly after the year 2000 or 2010, with more and more artists drawing digitally and Photoshop and Procreate, and literal copy and paste being so much easier, as opposed to like, Jim Lee copying and pasting a panel in an X-Men, in an Uncanny X-Men issue, actually using a photocopier and then actually like cutting out and pasting the photocopy of a panel next to the original panel on the actual artboard. So it's very easy for me to say, like, I wish the artist would have drawn this all over again. But certainly if an art director said to me, draw 30 soldiers with their arms raised up, I would look for some shortcuts.
Right, so last time we left Cobra Commander in the Florida Everglades swamps, as he had been sort of tied up and tortured, and then Nemesis had caught up with him and was unleashing havoc upon the Dreadnoks. So that is where we will pick up in our plot breakdown.
Plot breakdown.
In the Florida Everglades, Dreadnought Ripper leads Cobra Commander to an underground bunker where they find Dr. Vandermeer, a scientist who had been kidnapped and held there. He had been converting Energon from the swamps into a new form of energy to power experimental weaponry. The Doctor shows Cobra Commander how he's been able to refine the pure energy into an Energon cube, which supercharges Cobra Commander's insect robots. Outside, Xandar, Zarana, Buzzer and Torch are the only remaining Dreadnoks left following Nemesis's massacre. Using Buzzer as bait, Xandar makes an explosive Energon cocktail that explodes on Nemesis and buys them time to make their getaway. Cobra Commander updates Nemesis that they now have the secrets of Energon to build weapons for Globulus and Cobra La. Nemesis does not react as Cobra Commander expects, knocking him to the ground. Throw him to the floor. He has the realization that Nemesis was there to kill him for tarnishing the pure organic world of Cobra La with his blasphemous metal. They do battle. Cobra Commander is given a thrashing, but he assembles an Iron Man-style glove to deliver a beam of energy that defeats Nemesis. Victorious, Cobra Commander learns from Ripper the existence of Destro. We skip forward, and somebody has been recruiting an army and launching attacks on all of Destro's Mars facilities. Dreadnought Ripper arrives at Destro's place of work as a messenger to deliver an invitation. Destro and Mercer arrive with a squad of heavily armed goons in a nice little suburban town. Defense lasers destroy Destro's troops and his chopper. Cobra Commander shows Destro the lab that he has built and the energy source that he has used to create a souped-up bat. Cobra Commander proposes a deal. In exchange for Destro providing an army, he will provide Energon and technology. Destro accepts the deal. Escorting Destro to a packed town hall, Cobra Commander unveils a giant banner with a familiar red snake symbol on it, announcing that, "Together, we are Cobra!" Meanwhile, back at Cobra La, Globulus surveys the aftermath of Megatron's escape, as happened in the pages of the Energon Universe special. He views footage of the Transformers' metallic home planet. He will send an agent after Cobra Commander, and Pythona will depart Earth in a giant organic craft and take this war to the skies. Crikey, that was a long one, Tim.
Yeah, but that's okay. A lot happened in these.
Yeah, I mean, we had two sort of pretty different issues, and it was really interesting to see the approach. I found issue 4 was like very focused. It was mostly this grand battle between Cobra Commander and Nemesis Enforcer. Joshua Williamson again, sort of showing that he's interested in really exploring these one-on-one battles, as we had here with Nemesis and Cobra Commander, and in Duke, Cobra Commander against a bat and so on, and writing the hell out of that, and the artist being more than up to the challenge of drawing it in a very exciting way. And then in the other issue, in issue 5, it's they were sort of just took this very brave approach of just sort of skipping ahead and sort of like almost to a world that has been built out in the gaps between issues, that essentially Cobra Commander discovered the building block from where he's going to go forward with the Energon. Skip ahead, he's built a town, he's gathered a town full of goons and followers, and waged war on Destro, built this ally, and we're off to the races with Destro and Cobra's forces to be reckoned with. It's they're not wasting any time, and it seems incredibly ambitious.
And if I'm reading this right, issue 5 of Duke takes place between Cobra Commander 4 and 5. Or maybe issues 4 and 5 of Duke take place between issues 4 and 5 of Cobra Commander. Because Destro was wearing this red jacket and pants at the beginning of issue 5 of Cobra Commander. And he says, after the disaster, this is on page 2 of Cobra Commander 5.
After the disaster with Duke, I can no longer allow myself or Mars to lose face like this.
Yeah, because issue 4 as well, it closes out with this splash of Destro surveying the factory floor of Mars Industries, and this is the same view that Duke had back in issue 1 when he was spying. Yeah.
So the final page of Cobra Commander 4 looks back to that page of Duke 1.
It was Duke looking out over the floor, but it's kind of there or thereabouts in terms of timing, because after Duke, they shut down that operation. They're packing it up and they're taking it all away to somewhere else. So I think it must be the case that most of Duke happens in between the issue 4 of Cobra Commander and the beginning of issue 5, because we're picking up. It's post the events of Duke. He's in that other suit, and obviously the events of Duke with that his base being exploded still very sort of fresh in his mind.
It made me wonder if not in the Duke trade paperback and the Cobra Commander trade paperback, but in some kind of Energon Universe Year 1 compendium or some larger collection, G.I. Joe, the complete Energon Universe Volume 1, it made me wonder if some of these issues would be printed in a different order, more like publication order. And, I think for some readers that doesn't matter. But I think about this kind of thing because I'm always interested in sort of the editorial decisions and that go into a graphic novel collection. Like, Marvel will do an event. Marvel will have a big miniseries. And then there are a bunch of side miniseries that happen during it, just before it, and during and also after. And then you can get a soft cover for each of them. But then there'll be like a 1,500 page omnibus of every single one. And I think Marvel tends to put like the main miniseries first and then everything else after it. And if you're going to go to the trouble of putting every single issue of a larger story into one gigantic $150 book, I think, why not rearrange them more in the order that they were published, or like chronological story order, as ended up happening with the IDW Transformers IDW collection hardcovers, and to some extent the G.I. Joe ones. Our big takeaway from Cobra Commander 3 was how bloody it was and how well done and exciting and dramatic, but also just how bloody it was. And, did it make us uncomfortable? Did it feel like it was sort of further than G.I. Joe had ever gone and further than G.I. Joe should go? And I wanted to ask you, Mark, what is your take on the level of action or violence in issues 4 and 5?
I mean, there's definitely still violence there. Yeah, I'm thinking of, like, for example, Destro's goon being shot, standing next to him, and the sort of blood splattering against his mask. But in terms of what we're shown, it's closer to what you might expect from. Apart from a couple of those beats like that, it's pretty much closer to what you might expect from a more regular comic. There's less sort of out and out, shock from the level of brutality, whatever.
Yeah, when Cobra Commander dispatches Nemesis Enforcer, I'm taking it that he has completely killed Nemesis Enforcer, and that Nemesis Enforcer, should I just call him Nemesis, is not coming back. That he's not in the next issue gonna like crawl off camera with a hole in his chest and say, I survive, and then get, fixed. And he's also not gonna get cloned. And
I mean, I didn't take it as final. I mean, typically with comics, you kind of sort of slightly err on the edge of caution about dead being dead, that unless you sort of see the dead body, have the funeral, you can't be sure, and even then there's a good chance they might come back. So I kind of read it that he's probably incapacitated Nemesis for long enough for him to make his getaway, and that Nemesis isn't necessarily dead per se.
Okay. You know what?
And sort of talking as well to what they mentioned in the letter pages as well about sort of taking deaths and taking like a character off the board quite seriously.
All right. No, yeah, I can see that.
But yeah, so issue 4 had this, very big sort of action sequence, and it was very cool to see it's kind of Nemesis turn on Cobra Commander and have this sort of big conclusion between the two characters. But it was kind of the smaller moments that impressed me to some degree about this issue. There was a couple of bits that sort of really sort of made me pause and go, that's interesting. So the first one was when Cobra Commander is talking to this scientist, and he's been shown the lab, and Cobra Commander says, "Lord Globulus will be pleased. We need to get you a much bigger lab." And then there's this quite quiet panel of the scientist, in shadow, with a very small, but, thinking that perhaps Cobra Commander would be his rescuer from this prison, this underground vault, when in fact he's just got a new prisoner. He's got a new warden to keep on taking him prisoner and exploit him in a different way.
This is the second time that writer Wiliamson hits this beat, because a few pages earlier, as Cobra Commander comes down the stairs, the scientist says, "Are you here to save me?" And there's a panel where Cobra Commander doesn't say anything. He's just looking. And then the next panel, he turns 15 degrees to look slightly to the left and says flatly, "Yes." And that's this scene and the one you just described. And then the quiet standoff between Nemesis and Cobra Commander before the fight begins, before the argument begins, became, you can probably guess where I'm going with this sentence, in the same way that, was it issue 2? And I said, I have a favorite scene. And you said, I bet I can guess. And it's where the kid sticks his tongue out and Cobra Commander reaches to grab the kid. And Nemesis says, don't, or like pushes him away or steps in between them, you know, or like, stop drawing attention to yourself, or these people are beneath you. That Joshua Williamson has such a great handle on the menace of Cobra Commander, and what I think we almost never saw in the animated series was such a Cobra Commander, because he's always ineffective. You know, all of his threats are undone by the Joes, starting from, you know, the very first couple of episodes. You know, citizens of the world, all the governments have to give me all this money, give me all the power. And in the long-running Larry Hama story, as often as Cobra Commander is successful at hurting the Joes or hurting America or betraying one of his own or firing a pistol into a closed trunk of a car where two people are, as often as that happens, 3 times as often, he like uses a bunch of big words in front of his subordinates to complain about how things aren't going his way, or the Joes sort of fight him to a standstill. And so it's really exciting to see the Cobra Commander. And I think Williamson has sort of indirectly said something similar as a goal in the letters page. It's like, I always wanted the character who we sort of imagined was like all the way out there to be here.
And he's, you know, it's a Cobra Commander who's sort of very much on top of things, thinking a couple of steps ahead, sort of, you know, very good at scheming, you know, some degree of physical prowess, you know, even if he's working through a proxy. And there's a moment here, though, where he's sort of like, he's taken aback and there's a little bit more vulnerability, which is as he sort of got his scientist, he's sort of victorious about discovering the Energon, and he's saying to Nemesis how, you know, they're ready to bring it back to Cobra La and to Globulus, and then kind of is that quiet moment, and he's not understanding, and then he's just finally realizes, you know, it takes him a good amount of time, and then he finally realizes, what are you? I see. You were never here to help me with my mission. You're here to kill me. So it's almost the first and only time we see him on the back foot, and he you know, he argues that he's loyal to Cobra La and to Globulus. I kind of believe that to some degree. I think he's playing that relatively straight, that he was intending to bring this all back to Globulus.
Yes, I think it's possible that this Cobra Commander may have been intending to bring this all back to Globulus and then overthrow Globulus.
Yeah, maybe.
But
at late stage,
at the very least, he was yes, I believe you. He was going to bring this back to Globulus. There's a bit in this same scene where Buzzer has dropped his chainsaw, and Cobra Commander picks it up and uses it to attack Nemesis. And there's a little joy in seeing that, because I think every kid who plays with G.I. Joe toys has a different sort of rule for who can use what weapons, or different set of rules. Like in Star Wars movies and shows, I know that anyone can actually grab a lightsaber and turn it on. It's not coded to your DNA. It doesn't require force sensitivity. And in one of the books, one of the novels, like Luke is unconscious and Han grabs his lightsaber and turns it on, and I think like cuts a couple of loose rocks in a cave, or turns it on just as a flashlight. I remember thinking, yeah, I think he would do that. And that might be symbolic, because, you know, Han doesn't really believe in the Force and like wizards. And with G.I. Joe, of course, anyone can pick up a pistol or a machine gun and use it if they know how to, turn off the safety. Even though specifically on like the earliest G.I. Joe file cards, it's like this Joe was qualified in these specific weapons. And I think like, okay, not anyone can just pick up like Roadblock's Browning or Repeater's chain gun because they're just really heavy, or, like if you're Repeater, you need to hook it to your belt or whatever. But there's something, I don't know quite what the word is. It's like, I think the analogy might be like mixing your toys. Because I don't think we've ever seen anyone use Buzzer's chainsaw except Buzzer. Not even like Zartan. And it's just a chainsaw. And this Cobra Commander is very smart and also in this moment desperate. But, sort of going back to the cool factor. Like when I was a kid, basically the only one who could hold that Uzi was Snake Eyes. And I think Mutt came with a Mac 10, which is very similar. And then someone else came with a slightly larger Uzi. I forget who it was.
Those Iron Grenadiers came with a big Uzi, and Law and Order came.
Yes, okay, Law, right. Law came with one, and it's like, okay, now there's some license for someone else to have this badass submachine gun, not just Snake Eyes. Also, because I actually have a second one now, because I don't think either of those came in the accessory packs. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think they did. But I found the scene in sort of a not toyetic and not like anti-toyetic way, but sort of toy-ish way. Like, hey, that toy's using that other toy's toy. You might feel this way when like anyone but Ace is in a Sky Striker, or you might feel this way when like Lift Ticket is flying anything but the Tomahawk. I just thought it was sort of funny and neat, but also I appreciate that it's visually set up because Cobra Commander sees it and then he grabs it.
Mm-hmm. And then he gets grabbed by his mask, and that is ripped off with all of this sort of crackle of, looks like electricity. I'm assuming that that's all to do with like a booby-trapped mask that would electrocute the person trying to take it off.
Yeah, we this has been referenced before. I'm trying to remember. There's an episode, and there's an issue. Is it issue 24? There is an early issue in the first 3 years of the Marvel G.I. Joe where someone is going to take off his helmet, and Cobra Commander says something like, "If you do, it'll blow up," or "If you do, there's gas." Is that the Russ Heath issue?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then, is it also referred to in one of his file cards? I know that his battle armor costs more than a jet, but I feel like there has been more than one reference to the booby trap.
It happens for sure with the Fred armor as well.
Okay. Once again, I'm really delighted by Rus Wooton's hand-drawn sound effects. Mm-hmm. I think he's drawing them digitally. I don't think he's drawing them on paper and scanning them. But this Cobra Commander and Nemesis fight, the lettering is so dynamic, right? It's stretched. It's behind them. It's vertical and diagonal. It is both reflective of and accentuating the like lines and vectors and curves of the actual bodies and speed lines and sort of slash and swoop marks that Andrea Milana is drawing. And also, I love Analisa Leoni's color work on this whole series. And this fight is like, it's like candy colored. If you look at the 2-page spread, if you're holding the comic book and you're at the centerfold, the actual center fold, they're not staples, but with the 2 staples, like yellow sound effects on the left page, red sound effects, and blue sound effects on the right page. Some gradients, yellow becomes red, but some knockout backgrounds, one is all red, 2 of them are all blue, but kind of an electric blue, which really nicely matches the electricity that's happening. But then what's the sound effect to offset from the blue? It's its opposite color. It's yellow. And then, the big splash when Cobra Commander zaps Nemesis. Mm-hmm. I can't even read some of the letters. They're behind. But,
True.
But the 4 most important ones, BOOM ! are completely legible. It's just a good looking book. And let me say one last thing about Andrea Milana's art, not just for this issue, but for all 5 issues. I think a lot of comics fans want detailed art, and that can mean slightly different things to slightly different people. You know, like Todd McFarlane or Jim Lee, drawing a lot of bits and hatch lines and cross hatch lines, and like all the hairs on Wolverine's arm, and lots of textures for background leaves and trees and grass and tree bark, and like all of the shiny parts of a spandex costume, you know, or like a Brian Hitch Ultimate Comics costume has that like motorcycle or athletic ribbing, you know, on like the arms or the thighs. I think a lot of fans like that because that's sort of where comics have gone for the last 30 years. It's not how comics looked in the 60s. It's not how Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko were drawing. And Andrea Milana is reducing a lot of things. Like, you look at all of these faces, and there are a couple lines to describe like the planes where like part of the cheekbone becomes a different part of the cheek, or where the chin sort of goes from the front to the bottom. But Milana is leaving a lot of things out, which A, leaves a lot of room for color, and B, means that the pages are like, I don't get tired looking at them. And sometimes when I look at a really, really detailed comic art, I can get lost in it in a good way. Like Jeff Darrow, right? Rusty and the Big Guy, or
Big Guy and Rusty the Boy Robot.
Big Guy and Rusty the Boy Robot, or Shaolin Cowboy, or Hard Boiled. Like that's like something very specific. That's like Where's Waldo territory. You know, like, not to look ahead too far, but at the end of Cobra Commander 5, there is a cover for Destro #1. And I'm starting to see this more sort of traditional, like, artist who draws a lot of detail, like a lot of small, thin lines to describe, like, the chair Destro's, the throne Destro's sitting in, and all the different bits of his costume, and his mask, and his machine gun. And Andrea Milana in Cobra Commander is cartooning a little bit by simplifying. The artists like Mike Mignola or Alex Toth, who say a lot with very little, or like Mike Parabeck on Batman Adventures way back when, the book based on the cartoon. These are artists who, they can't hide behind lots of like scratchy or detailed lines, and they don't need to. Every single line they put there is sort of like the minimum lines you needed, and there's no like extra. And so I find this Cobra Commander book to be just very peppy in sort of its posing and its dynamism, but also I don't feel like, oh, this is a really undetailed style. I'm not, quote, getting my money's worth. I feel like these are really smart and stylish artistic decisions.
Mm. And then getting into issue 5, it's sort of like a really different approach to kind of what we had for the previous 4. We've jumped ahead, but we're also seeing most of the events of the issue through the kind of the lens of Destro, and we, along with Destro, are like, hold on, what's happening here? We've kind of launched into the middle of all of these sabotage bits, and we're not entirely sure what's going on, and there's a message being delivered by Ripper, and Ripper is conveying almost like the menace of Cobra Commander from his reaction to him, that he's so terrified of his the way that he acts and his unpredictability and his ruthlessness, that we kind of we see that through his eyes. And then we're sort of in this suburban town, and much like Destro, we're like, hold on, what on earth is going on? Because we don't have the lead up to this. We're sort of being dropped into it.
Yeah, Cobra Commander does not appear in his own comic until page 8, which is not something that has happened in the previous 4 issues. He shows up not on the first page of issue 1, but there's that misdirect where you think the guy who's him is not him, and it's the other guy in issue 1. But yes, you make a good point about the point of view and the focus of this series changing for issue 5, and it feels, this is not a bad thing. It feels a little bit like a different series because we're not following the guy that we've been following for 3 months. We're following the other guy from the other series.
Yeah.
And
his henchman, that other guy from the other series.
yeah. And because we have jumped ahead in time. Yeah. I wonder, I can't imagine there are a lot of people who are only reading Cobra Commander and didn't also read Duke. And I don't think anyone would be lost if they are only reading Cobra Commander. But certainly this issue resonates a lot more if you're reading both Cobra Commander and Duke, as you all should be.
Yeah, it's building upon it, so you're getting a bigger, a richer experience from knowing the events of Duke leading into this.
So you, in your plot breakdown, described a nice little town, a suburban, a nondescript suburbia in issue 5. It is not named, so we'll have to wait until a later Energon Universe comic to really know what this is and where this is. Although, based on, issue 9 or 10 of Marvel G.I. Joe and many comics since then, we all have a very, very good guess.
Yeah, he described it as that he had built this quaint small town at the same time as developing the technology.
Right. There's another thing. I'm going back to the art. There's another subtle thing that Andrea Milana does in each of these 2 issues, which I really appreciate. In issue 4, yes, I'm going back to issue 4. There's that page where Cobra Commander and Nemesis have this face-off, and there are 4 wordless panels in a row where they're just standing looking at each other. And then Cobra Commander says, "What are you doing, you imbecile? Move." And he snaps his fingers. In those first 2 panels, Milana, this could be one of those cases where you draw something and then you just copy it and paste it and make it a little larger and crop in, which simulates like a film camera move or a zoom in. And I do think a little bit of the background is repeated, but the smoke has been drawn differently, and Nemesis's pose has been, both Cobra Commander and Nemesis have been redrawn. It's not, there's very little difference. It's not like Nemesis like takes a step forward and like bends forward. And then in issue 5, the scene at the end when we cut back to Cobra La, and Globulus is pointing to a computer screen which shows a metal planet with a sort of a hole in it. And then the next panel, you see a slight close-up of that. Milana has redrawn it. It's not like this was drawn once and then like zoomed out for the previous panel. And it's a very small thing. And I think if it had been copied and pasted, no one but me would have like noticed it and had a tiny problem with it. And I think a lot of people wouldn't notice it. But it's just a thing that I appreciate, that it's one more, despite the Wally Wood, as paraphrased as quoted by Larry Hama and badly paraphrased by me, despite the sort of adage that I mentioned for the cover to issue 5, I appreciate that Milana is sort of giving us the whole new experience for each panel and not doing a lot of copy and paste.
Mm-hmm. As is, seeing as how we're in Cobra La now, that sort of, we had the grand finale towards the back end of the issue and the unveiling of the Cobra sigil, the grand moment of "We are Cobra," and the crowd sort of cheering. The crowd ain't the only thing that goes bananas. And then I was thinking, okay, that's it. That's a finale. That's the strong beat to end on it. And then it's the page turn and Cobra La. What? Hold on. What? Cobra La? It's this shared universe and building on what's been going on, and this is building on the issue that just came out a couple of weeks ago, the Free Comic Book Day. We've had the big fight between Globulus and Megatron, and we're essentially just a couple of minutes on from that sequence, I think. And I was not expecting it, and that was probably the biggest what the moment for me, that we're back in Cobra La. he's seeing his reaction to discovering more about the Transformers, Megatron's capture, and the memories that he hadn't been shared.
That Cobra Commander hadn't shared.
Yeah, Cobra Commander hadn't shared with Globulus. So we saw previously Cobra Commander, had tapped into Megatron's memories and knew about kind of the giant robots in space, but was keeping that a secret from him. So they have finally discovered that, and within the space of just a page, it's like, okay, we know that there's giant robots in space. Off you go. Off you go, Pythona. Take the war into the stars. And boom, we're, in the space of just one page, we're now in a world where we can actually begin to see how Cobra Commander joins to the, world of G.I. Joe and joins to a shared Energon universe that could see Transformers in space and Void Rivals all beginning to bump up against each other.
Yeah, I turned the second to last page, Globulus says,
"A world of blasphemous metal, and they are here now. They will bring about our demise. We must send another agent to find the commander. Bring him back to us so I can squeeze the life out of him myself."
And then I thought, oh, I have to talk about this, Mark. We have to guess who this other agent is that they're going to send either right now, this issue on the page turn, or in a couple of months in some other comic book, to go out. I was just assuming on Earth. And then Pythona says, "And I will explore the source of these invaders." And I thought, oh, she says "and," so she's not the agent. Okay, so yeah, Mark and I have to guess. Well, do we know any other original Cobra? I mean, there were only 3 Cobra Law characters who had toys. Yep. And there may have been a Pythona toy. There was some development work on it, but there was no Pythona toy. But there are 4 sort of marquee Cobra Law characters who get speaking roles in the animated movie, and then you have all the sort of citizens and scientists and customizers may have made those toys, but those are not coming out. And I thought, oh, is this a place where Joshua Williamson or some other Energon universe architects are going to create a new character like Pythona, the Royal Guard, like Globulus, like Nemesis, to be another person, like the Cobra Law bounty hunter,
Yeah,
whatever
or repurpose another existing character as a Cobra Law character. You could see it with maybe someone like Venomous Maximus or something like that could probably slot into that world. Interesting.
Yeah. And I thought, okay, that's fun, and that's a breadcrumb. It's a very big, tasty bread. That's a crouton. That's a fancy crouton from a fancy restaurant. And as I turned the page, I thought, oh, they're going to go like bump into the Void Rivals. Like, I don't think they're going to, I think it's more interesting if they bump into the Void Rivals first, not if they bump into the Transformers. I think maybe we're supposed to think they're going to bump into the Transformers. And then one page further in the final, in the second to last paragraph of the letters page, editor Sean says, also, we have some big Energon Universe news hitting soon, and most of the crew will be at San Diego Comic-Con to discuss in person. See you there, right? This book streets in the third-ish week of May 2024. San Diego is the third-ish week of July. And I feel like, did I read this at Bleeding Cool? Did someone say this to me on the internet? I feel like, did they say this in another letters page? There's gonna be a crossover. There's gonna be an Energon Universe crossover, like in a year. Did I make that up?
Well, they've hinted at some point the worlds will come together. So they have said something to that effect, but they've not said exactly when. They said they want their corners of the universe to be able to stand on their own initially.
Right.
But and Transformers and Void Rivals very much playing in the same space already, but sort of more compatible, more naturally simpatico being in space. But yeah, we definitely got the seed of something here to happen. And in terms of published content, there's just been an announcement of a Jason Howard cover series, combined cover.
Variant cover.
Yeah, so I think it will feature on a second printing variant for a number of the upcoming issues.
Fact correcting Mark here from the future to say that the Jason Howard connecting covers will be on variant covers for Destro number 1, Scarlet number 1, Transformers number 9, and Void Rivals number 10. It will be available in black and white and full color. About 4 images or so to create one giant image, and this is the first time, I think, in print where we're beginning to see Void Rivals, Transformers, and G.I. Joe characters on the same page. And you know, in this one, it's just essentially a cool image of all of the characters, you know, joined up and sort of jumping towards us, the viewer. So it's not necessarily telling too much of a story beyond look at all of these cool characters in our shared universe, and they're all in one giant picture. But you know, it's beginning to come together, isn't it?
Yeah, and I am, you know, I've got a healthy budget for reading comics, and I can also read comics at my store, and I don't have to pay for them. And I think about folks who can't make it to a store very often, have limited space, or can't devote a lot of money to expensive comic books, and so they're very choosy. Or, you know, if you've budgeted for 3 or 4 Energon Universe comics a month, and then like one of them is double sized, or all of a sudden there's let's say you budget for 3 or 4 and suddenly there's like a 5th miniseries. I am concerned that 6 months or a year and a half from now, there's going to be a big crossover, and it's not going to be like 3 months of all of the series that you were already buying, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, that it'll be there'll be like an alpha special and an omega special, and those will be like $6, or there'll be like an event mini series, the way that IDW did Revolution and then First Strike. And so someone who's already reading, let's say it was happening right now, so I can use these titles. Someone's already reading Duke and Cobra Commander and Transformers and maybe Void Rivals and probably the Larry Hama Real American Hero book. And then all of a sudden they have to like get some miniseries that's like, you know, Cobra Law versus Void Rivals, you know, and that is both a jumping on point for new readers and a jumping off point for existing readers who might throw up their hands and say, too much money or too hard to keep track of. And like every 2 months, you know, like my store can potentially send an email to all of our like Batman subscribers or our Amazing Spider-Man subscribers, or it's like, okay, there's going to be a Spider-Man event. It's called Gang War. It's some issues of Amazing. It's some issues of Miles. There are a couple specials, and there are like 5 additional miniseries that it's like, what's Shang-Chi doing during Gang War? He doesn't have an existing monthly book, so he's getting 3 months of his own book so he can be involved in this crossover, right? Or like, you know, Blood Hunt, the thing with the Avengers, and Blade. That's a 5-issue miniseries. There's some specials, but also like for 1 month, the regular Fantastic Four book. It's like, what are they doing during Blood Hunt? And I will read it all. I read almost everything in the, you know, IDW. I didn't read ROM. And I only read a little bit of Mask when G.I. Joe showed up. But right now, everything is sort of tantalizing, where they're talking about each other and learning about each other. And I think the Energon universe is doing a good job of, whenever there's just a full-blown G.I. Joe and Transformers fight, I think most people will be excited about it. And I think only a minority will be turned off. It's like, oh, I knew they were getting to this, but this isn't for me. I don't want to read this. But it's going to be a bigger step when it's like also Void Rivals and or many extra comic books. And as a reader, I can't wait. As someone who like wants G.I. Joe fans and Transformers fans to be happy and like not to be grumpy on the internet, I'm a little cautious. And as a retailer, it's like, oh man, is this where a bunch of people drop books?
I spy with my little eye.
So the big one is probably Dr. Laszlo Vandermeer, the Nobel Prize-winning scientist and genius behind the mass device from the cartoon, the first miniseries, wasn't it?
Yeah. We first meet him in the cartoon. We first meet him when Major Blood is actually pretending to be him, and he's tied up to a tree or tied up behind a tree, like 30 feet away. The Joes need him so they can build their own mass device. Oh, and let's break this down a little bit more, Mark. When we see this scientist in issue 4 of Cobra Commander, he is not named.
Mm-hmm. And he's got a big beard, long hair, looking disheveled.
Yes, so you probably wouldn't guess that it's him, even though there have been 2 little Easter eggs in previous comics hinting at the mass device.
Yes, I was going to say, so we saw the mass device on the wall, on that pinboard wall in Conspiracy Wall in Duke #1, and we also saw it in Hawk's file in the Free Comic Book Day book.
Now, just to double check, even though we saw those 2 drawings of the mass device, we have not seen his name written on any conspiracy wall or like piece of paper on a desk, right?
No.
Okay. And the way that he's drawn in Cobra Commander 5 does match how he's drawn in the first episodes of the cartoon in 1983.
Maybe the mass device will just remain as a Easter egg in the background, or it might be that it continues to be a plot point that sort of gets fleshed out.
So I think Wiliamson, if he wants to have it actually get built and or used, I think that's fair. And, you know, every new continuity is taking from many old continuities and mixing them. So I think it's fair. It does, to me, so belong to the original cartoon, and it is so not a part of the Marvel 155 issues. And it doesn't belong to Hama's 150 issue continuation of that continuity. Chuck Dixon did use a version of the mass device in his first 2 years of the IDW continuity. So it's had a toy, quite amazingly, a toy that came with a DVD, right? Of that 5-part miniseries, or did you have to assemble it? I forget. Were there different components?
I never had that
set?
one, but yeah, I think it exists.
Yes, you can get the mass device as a toy. So I think it's cool, but I'm always a little cautious about sort of mixing the continuity. Although, you know, this might be a good way to get Transformers to Earth or Joes and Cobras to Cybertron. Oh, is this the space bridge? Huh. Other eyes. I bet you've got an I Spy on the next page of issue 5 of Cobra Commander.
Is this the one with the screen?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got a screen here with some characters on it. There's the Dreadnoks. We can see a little bat head. Tomax and Zamots, which is their second on-page appearance. We already know that they're going to be a big feature of the Destro series from the solicit information and the covers. There's a little sign that I can't quite work out, a triangle.
I think it's just a pinpoint for a map.
And then the bigger one is Storm Shadow. Well, what looks to be Storm Shadow on that board as well. So and for those of us who have been looking at spoilery future covers, we can expect Storm Shadow to make an appearance in the pages of Scarlet.
What other Easter eggs?
I had a dialogue Easter egg, which was Destro said, "Get to the chopper."
Yes, yes. And Cobra Commander says, where does it say he's also a salesman? Yeah, Mercer picks up Cobra Commander. Cobra Commander says,
I have heard you are the #1 arms dealer in the world. I am a salesman too. I have an opportunity for you. Follow me.
And then they're in the underground lab where there's Energon stuff happening. Is this the first hint we've gotten of who this Cobra Commander is beyond the Cobra Law stuff?
Yeah, we don't know a huge amount about Cobra Commander sort of who he was beyond Cobra La. They said that he was an outsider who was sort of accepted into Cobra La, although I think Nemesis says that he never really accepted him. So yeah, are you saying I guess the salesman is part of his identity of who he was before Cobra La, much like Cobra Commander was a salesman in the pages of A-Ra.
Yes, Larry Hama's origin is that Cobra Commander is a homegrown domestic terrorist who creates a paramilitary organization funded by pyramid schemes. And he's disillusioned with America. Before all of this, he was a used car salesman.
Quote of the week, 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 quote of the week.
I had a favourite line of dialogue. Destro.
You would kill your own men?
There are always more where they came from. Besides, fear and hate are useful for keeping people in line.
Yeah, that exchange, and then the next couple of pages in the like community center with the crowd of white people with machine guns and pistols feels a little bit like now in America, in some parts of America. You know, this is not a Cobra Commander who's going to like the black part of a city or Florida to recruit retirees, you know, into his rebellion. You know, he's not at the Rio Grande, like hoping to like convince migrants to take up arms against America. This is a crowd of what looks like all white men. And maybe there's a lady in the front row just before the panel that says whoosh. This feels like this blue collar farmers, suburban folks, not necessarily city dwellers. I don't know if this is a favorite line of dialogue, but I was really struck by when Destro shakes Vandermeer's hand, and then Vandermeer shakes Mercer's hand and whispers, "Kill me, please." And it's both a smaller font and word balloon, and also has the broken outline, which is my preference for how you show that someone's whispering. Comics, some like Marvel books are doing normal size and a regular line, but it's gray instead of black, and I just find that hard to read. You know, I think we've all seen like the sci-fi movie or the horror movie where someone has been experimented on or someone has been captured, and like the hero sort of is infiltrating the like villain headquarters or science lab and sees some poor soul that's like stuck there, and the person, the creature says or whispers, "Kill me." And sometimes the hero does. Sometimes there's no time. They got to like grab the keys and run and set the bomb and get out of there. And we've never seen this in G.I. Joe. And this feels like if all the blood and torture in issues 2 and 3 made me both excited but also uncomfortable, this feels like sort of where I thought the like heavy PG-13 would actually go in terms of adult themes without as much graphic violence. Because I feel like this is it's just really, it's chilling, but it's not like someone chopped off his arm or tore his arm off or something and he's screaming, you know. Also really interesting that in terms of you describing that so much happens in issue 5 and the point of view is different and we jump ahead, it's really striking that as much time as 1.5 issues of the Duke miniseries spent on Destro building and having and deploying a bat, that Cobra Commander just has one now. And he says,
"You call them bats, correct? It's an adequate design, if a bit primitive. I understand this model recently failed in combat."
And then Destro says, "How do you?"
"Because you lack what I have."
So not only does the point of view in the issue sort of shift because we start with Destro, but Cobra Commander's already done a whole bunch of stuff. He got a bat and he changed it.
Mm-hmm.
I have an I Spy.
Okay.
This is the first issue 4. Page 7 of issue 4 is the first appearance of Energon cubes
Mm-hmm.
in this new continuity. Dr. Vandermeer says, I realized I could never truly understand or reproduce this power, but with the raw elements and the right tools, I've managed to expand it, dilute it with other sources of radiation to create a less pure version, but one that still works. And he grabs a sample, he changes his glasses, he types some keys, he zaps them in a like gravity field, and then all of a sudden it's a cube. Mm-hmm. And then he removes the cube, and then it's a little unclear. I feel like there's sort of a panel missing where like he hands the cube to Cobra Commander, or it's Cobra Commander who takes the cube. Because in the next panel, Cobra Commander is grabbing one of his insect mechanical things. And then in the next panel, the insect is eating one of the Energon cubes. And I feel like there's a tiny beat missing where like Cobra Commander puts it down on the thing or hands the cube to, it's like how you like put a dog treat out for a dog. Anyway, it's still a cool scene. So what we now know, I think, is that there is the Energon that's in the earth that the Dreadnoks had found. And then there is this other form of Energon that a brilliant scientist is cutting, that he's diluting.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say one more thing.
Okay.
The scene in issue 5 in Springfield where Cobra Commander pitches that they work together, or that Destro work for him, is satisfying because we never saw this in the animated series. And I have not reread Destro's first appearances in the Marvel run. So I forget how much is explained besides sort of the sentence in, his file card. It's like, someone's got to supply the weapons. But this is a really satisfying, it's a little bit blackmail. Work for me or I'll kill you, mm-hmm. which just reinforces how vicious this Cobra Commander is. It's a scene I sort of always wanted to see in whatever continuity. And, I'm not counting Rise of Cobra. And it also, because it is so inherently about Energon, I feel like this is adding additional space for Wiliamson to make the humans meet the robots in a very sci-fi way. And it's like, if I'm like, I still like my G.I. Joe separate from my Transformers, you can remind me in a few months during the big crossover. It's like, well, they shook hands like moments after looking at Energon. So it's there from the get-go.
Yeah. And it kind of, joins the dots on that sort of relationship that you've got this thing I want, I've got this thing you want, let's work together. You might not like me or trust me. And Destro, what he is saying up front, Mercer tells him, this guy's nuts, boss. And Destro says, we need this power source, therefore we will play this lunatics game for now. So it's already, starting the ticking clock of it's a distrustful relationship, and there's not going to be any loyalty there. And, you're just going to wait for the time being that one doesn't need the other one, and they can do away with them and betray them.
Right. I have one last art thing that I just want to call out on the 2-page spread in issue 5. Pages 16 and 17 in the community center with the logo, the Cobra logo, finally unveiled on that big banner. I don't know if it is artist Andrea Milana or color artist Analisa Leoni, but the banner is sort of waving. You know how like the American flag, or excuse me, the British flag or any flag, how a flag flaps in the wind and it curls back and forth. This is not a like stiff rectangle that's hanging from the ceiling. It is just unfurled, and so it's got like a curl and a counter curl. And I very much appreciate that the Cobra symbol, as sort of mapped onto it, reflects that curl, that the Cobra symbol is it. Yeah, it's not just like a square made into like a diamond or a trapezoid because it's in perspective, like it's on a flat wall. It has some rounded warping to it, and then there's a darker tone on the banner to show where the shadow is. And it's just a nice detail. It's the kind of thing that I feel like if someone was in a rush, or if the artist is like, I don't want to draw it, and the color artist is like, oh man, it's, like when Tom Riley said to us, like, oh no, I did a guide for where all the shadows from the blinds in issue 1 of Duke were for color artist Jordi Belair, because I didn't want her to have to figure out where all those things were. So whoever's doing the work here, it is something drawn in perspective accurately, and so it's not a like mistake or an inaccurate thing that would distract me. It's like, oh, that looks great, and they got it right. Thanks.
Yeah, I did think it was a bit of a strange double page, though, to be honest. There isn't a huge amount happening on the right-hand side of that double page. Look at it in isolation.
Yes. Fully 1/4 of this 2-page spread is a wall. It's not like risers with additional people cheering, or like a balcony with additional people cheering. It's not a second logo. It's not a giant computer screen with like a live feed of Cobra Commander's face in close up. It's not a big map with a target. It's not a much larger word balloon pointing back with like much larger type saying we are Cobra. I think narratively the moment earns a double page spread, but yes, in terms of art, sort of geography, not the most powerful 2-page spread I've seen.
It's Joe-age time.
Should we score this one now?
Yes.
You want to go first, Tim? What do you think?
8. The fight and the tension in issue 4. I did have a favorite line of dialogue, which I'll say right now. In issue 5, and this is part of why I like this issue, just sort of the character dynamics. When Cobra Commander says, you, Ripper, Dreadnought, to show that I can be capable of mercy, I grant you your freedom. Run. No way, mate. The moment I turn, you're just going to shoot me in the back. I'd rather stay.
I guess you have some brains after all.
Menace and threat is so effective, and maybe more effective than like tearing someone's arm off or beating them to death in the snow. So for the great fight and tension in issue 4, and the sort of like origin of Cobra that's finally fully crystallized in issue 5, and also a satisfying link to Transformers in issue 5, I give this an 8, maybe a 9.
Very good. I think I'm probably in there with a 9. A couple of great issues, sort of in isolation. It's probably even better, as a wider whole. I think generally with comics, it's really hard to stick the landing and have a satisfying conclusion. They've kind of done it again here. They've sort of set up the world, the Cobra Commander in that role as a lead of a terrorist organization, working with that other guy Destro that we know is his right hand man, and not only that, sort of concluding the series, but sort of opening up the world to a wider universe in the last couple of pages as well, and making me look forward to what is to come, which is kind of the opposite of where I began, where I was almost terrified of how the worlds of G.I. Joe and Transformers and Void Rivals might join up. Now it's seeming like a much more sort of appetizing prospect. So we shall see.
A minute ago, you said they stuck the landing again. You're saying the Cobra Commander miniseries sticks the landing after the Duke miniseries?
Yeah, that they both had satisfying conclusion, but both had satisfying 5th issues.
Yeah.
Particularly as it's the same writer delivering both. Okay, very good. So I think that is us done with Cobra Commander for now, but hopefully before too very long, we will be talking to the artist of the book, Andrea Milana, who I found out now is from the latest solicits, will be working on issue 3 of Destro. So we won't have to wait for too very long before we find more work from him in the Skybound Energon universe. And beyond that, we will be covering the latest issues of G.I. Joe as they come out. Scarlet issue 1 will be out on the 5th of June. A Real American Hero 307 will be out on the 19th of June, as will Destro issue 1 as well. So lots to look forward to. And in terms of what we're doing, we will be at Joe Fest in Atlanta, Georgia in June as well. So look forward to doing something special for that and seeing people in person.
Yeah.
So if you want to find more about Talking Joe, talkingjoe.co.uk is the website, which has links to all of the places you can find us, all of the podcast channels, as well as links to our Facebook group. So get involved in the discussion over there. Talking Joe on Twitter and Instagram, where you can see all the latest news. We're also on Patreon, patreon.com/talkingjoe. So a big thanks to our backers, Richard, Sam, Jay, Bill, Christopher, Justin, Rob, Shane, Ryan, Simon, and Chris, who are all getting early access to episodes, as well as some exclusive content. Tim, where can people find you?
Atomic Abe, that's our YouTube channel. My creative partners in New York research and create video essays on TV and film. They are nostalgic and funny and smart and fun. I own a comic book store in Somerville, Massachusetts, which is next to Cambridge and Boston. That's Hub Comics, and I write about G.I. Joe at my blog, arealamericanbook.com.
Excellent stuff. So, all that said and done, we'll be off. But remember that
Nobody Beats Talking Joe, an international podcast!
Laters. Just see what I did there.
I did. He hasn't done that in the series, right?
No, he stopped doing it. Yeah.
Did you just do it once at the beginning?
I think it was mostly issue 1.
Yeah, that's fine. We can fill it in our heads.